Hello everybody, this is a part 2 to a video I made not that long ago. The first stage is Emerald Hill Zone, which is pretty similar to Green Hill Zone. Despite the naming of hill, there actually isn't that much hills in it, as Emerald Hill Zone is a lot more flatter than Green Hill Zone. With, I don't even remember, is there loop-de-loops in this level? It's mostly just a lot of waterfalls. A lot of fresh water sources, but also a lot of spikes. But we did see that in Green Hill Zone, but it feels like there's a little bit more spikes in this level. Keep in mind when I say livable/survivable, I'm also taking into account that Sonic has defeated Eggman at this point, meaning that there'd be probably no badniks in the level. When it comes to momentum and platforming here, there actually isn't too much. Like I said, it's mostly just flat land with some up in areas. There's some springs that you probably wouldn't survive, but for the most part, there's not a whole lot bad going on here. In fact, it might be more livable than Green Hill Zone, even though there isn't very many trees compared to Green Hill Zone, so if you need wood, that would kind of suck. There's a lot more, it looks like, fresh water, which would be great for livability, so this actually might be the best stage to live in so far that I've covered. So, if we're going to live in a Sonic stage, currently, I would say Emerald Hill Zone is not a bad place to be, as there isn't too much extreme land here. As you can clearly see, most of it just pretty generic looped slopes. There's some weird springs and a couple odd spikes, but the fresh water, a couple little trees there if you need some wood to make a house, a nice little beach in the background there, as well as a lot of fresh water from waterfalls, make this a pretty alright place. Too bad there doesn't seem to be any regular food there. You know, maybe some of the animals running around from the badniks, you probably could eat one of those pigs, but yeah. Next level we're covering is Chemical Plant Zone, and off the bat, well, the title alone says this is not going to be very survivable. The terrain is a lot more extreme, and according to Sonic Generations, these little things here, they go all over the place and are narrow strips that can fall down to a bottomless pink water. So yeah, one of the most dangerous parts about this level is the fact that there is water, and we talked about that in our last Sonic video, so go check that out. But this one is particularly like pink based off the chemicals, so pretty much anything to do with this water would be extremely dangerous to pretty much everybody. I guess Sonic just doesn't breathe it in. But I do not know what that is. Pink water is not normal. In fact, it's called a chemical plant. I assume it has chemicals in it, so yeah, that's dangerous. Also, any of the badniks in this level are most likely here because this level was most likely built by Eggman, though it's unsure. But anyway, if there's robots, would most likely be lingering around this area more so in a place like Emerald Hill Zone if we're keeping that intact. Count, I should say. There's also no easy way for anyone but Sonic to get around this area. Well, there's a city in the background, which I guess you could live in. We're not playing in the city, we're playing in chemical plants. So that's just a background element. It doesn't seem like we actually can easily get to it from this area. And besides, everything in this level looks like it's going to be very difficult to navigate. This is not even just traditional like loops and slopes. It's a lot of these moving blocks, which some of me I sure can manage, but you have to do a lot of climbing, which I'm not even sure you'll be able to, or you can really try to do. Let alone use these red, where the hell those things are. And I doubt that you'll be able to survive in one of these pipe things that Sonic breaks through. One you have to break through, which I don't know. Sonic's pretty strong, so maybe it is weak, or maybe it is like a hard thing to break through. But either way, you're probably not going to survive that. So Chemical Plant. It is not a stage that I would want to live in. There also seems to be a weird haze in the background, but below the city, like in between the actual factory that we're in compared to the actual city in the background. If you can kind of see it, it's kind of hard to tell. But yeah, either way, I don't like the sound of that. And also, at the end, during the boss fight, which we're going to see that Eggman's not going to be there because this boss fight kind of sucks, for these platforms that move up and down. So if you're even near the chemical water, you just find a random platform that will drop you to your death, basically. So yeah, very dangerous level, so let's move on to the next one. Overall, this base is not very good. There isn't really any spikes or as many bottomless pits, as there actually are, but not as many as you might think. But the dangerous water, the way it seems to be very, very hard to navigate for a normal person that do a lot of jumps and platforming and climbing up stuff, which is something that a normal person really can't do. As well as those speed boosters, which would probably not work on a regular person. It would work on Sonic, but yeah, it probably would hurt you way more than actually getting you to go fast. But yeah. The next level is Aquatic Ruin Zone. So, one of the problems with Aquatic Ruin Zone is the fact that there's a lot of water, but you can't avoid the water in-game and in real life if you're actually playing this area. And the terrain isn't too as dangerous as Chemical Plant, but there is a lot of like climbing you gotta do. But there's a lot of forest back there, there's a lot of trees and stuff, though it does seem like a pretty deadly jungle. Eggman has laid out a bunch of like little spike traps like everywhere, so they may be one use. Maybe Sonic deactivated them. It's unsure, so that's pretty dangerous. There is a lot of water here, but it's mostly one you can swim. You can probably swim up and know what to deal with going through it. After all, there's levels designed to be played on land and in water, so you can actually choose to play either way. but the punishment is playing in the water. But Sonic can't swim, but we can. Unlike Labyrinth Zone, which is basically a whole tunnel system, which would be not easy to live in. This one you could probably manage pretty fine if you knew how to swim. Yeah, really, the only thing here is the spiked traps. There, everything else is fine, other than being a jungle. It's not as good as Emerald Hill for obvious reasons. Like, so there is water too, which you could use for drinking, as well as there's probably a lot more food in this area, even though the jungles probably be a lot harder to navigate in the background. And the ruins really aren't that dangerous in comparison. Like I said, most of the traps here are just the spike things that Eggman shoots out. It is possible that some of the Badniks might be there still, but overall, I don't see this one as that bad. I would prefer living in Emerald Hill Zone, but everything else here seems pretty okay. There's definitely a lot more wood you want to build a shelter, plus there seems to be a little bit of shelter with the ruins here, but nothing really that great. But overall, this one isn't too bad. The next level is Casino Night Zone. So first off, we can see this is a giant casino with a city in the background. As you can clearly see, we are probably still in the city, like maybe it's like Atlantic City or Las Vegas thing going on here. So this stage is unique as we have to worry about any badniks here because there's only one and it doesn't do any damage. But the only problem with that is that it seems like we're in a giant pinball thing. And while this is great for Sonic, who can bounce around and jump around all over the place, but for a regular person, well, not so much. As it seems like most of the level, in order to get around, you gotta go bounce yourself around like you are at one big pinball in order to get to the elevators. Which, you know, the elevators, they're pretty standard. That's pretty nice to actually have some safety features like that. But for the most part, you're not going to be able to use this pinball spring here, and getting launched up that high, then getting launched back down and bouncing off spring, bumpers and stuff like that would probably kill you. But, so yeah, it's kind of hard to say. Could you make it into the city easy from the casino? Is it sort of that situation? You'd be guided out? Is Sonic just taking the pinball route for his species? And I don't really know. It's kind of hard to tell. But, yeah, I would say this stage is pretty dangerous, because gambling is pretty dangerous. You can lose all your money, too. Keep that in mind. So I'm pretty iffy on this stage. Like, we're talking about, like, is this like a Mobian little area that's easy to access for, like, the city area if you just use the elevator, like Casino-opolis and Sonic Adventure 1? Or is it just, like, a crazy pinball level the whole entire time? I'm just going to go based off what I see right now, and the city does look a little far away, so we don't know if we're actually in it or not, per se, like, really in the heart of it. So, because of that, we're going to name this, or I'm going to say this stage is pretty dangerous just because of how much moving platforms you are going through. Like in the other ones, you can kind of walk over the loopy-loops. Here, you're pretty much forced to jump through all of them. And while there is elevators that are pretty human-safe, everything else in this level is pretty much deadly as hell. Unless you're supersonic. Next up is Hilltop Zone. And fun fact, this is originally supposed to be part of Emerald Hill Zone during their past and future thing they were going to do in Sonic 2. Learn more about that in my Sonic the Hedgehog 2 whole retrospect video. Now, despite looking like Emerald Hill Zone, it is not because, well, there's lava up in here. Because we're near a volcano. We're also seem to be at pretty high altitude, as we see we're above the clouds, meaning that the air here is going to be hard to breathe, so it's already a knock against it. Also lava, which is extremely dangerous to people, and as well as spikes everywhere. In order to even navigate this stage, you gotta use these, and in these cave areas, there's tons of spike. Next zone is Mystic Cave Zone, and this zone is actually less dangerous than the other one, even though it's in a cave. So while the Hilltop Zone does have some natural resources like wood and some stone, I guess, to build a little house and stuff like that, it's also way too high in the air to live in because you need to learn how to breathe that little air, which is not very easy, trust me. There's also a lot of dangerous, well, falling off the edge is pretty easy. You need to be able to know how to climb up mountainsides, as well as the fact there's lava everywhere, when, you know, lava is pretty dangerous. So yeah, do not recommend living here. It's very dangerous. Do not live here. I mean, not that you would, because it doesn't exist, but if it did exist, do not live here. One of the main thing it gives away is that the terrain isn't that dangerous. In fact, it seems pretty easy to climb up, mostly since it seems like that someone's been here before. Maybe some human put some torches here and there to make it light up. And yeah, the bats comes to the biggest problem here. There is no resources, and there is spike traps everywhere. Not as extreme as some of the maybe other ones, because they're kind of predictable, and their switches are pretty easy to grab compared to regular humans, so you can actually grab it if you needed to, so that's nice. But yeah, there's still a lot of danger here. But it's not as dangerous as you might think. You can probably find a way to live here unless you're not claustrophobic, but that would make me out because I'm also claustrophobic, so I wouldn't like living here. There are also crates, which you might open up and find something in there, but they are moving, so I don't know. Would they stop? There also might be danger of some badniks hiding in the corners. There is always going to be badniks, at least maybe hiding the stage, but this stage probably will likely have one of those snake guys still there that Eggman forgot about and Sonic didn't destroy. So it's always a possibility that might happen. There is also a dangerous amount of bottomless pits here and there. so you gotta keep out for that. One of them is a dangerous spike pit, which can kill you instantly. So yeah, this is not a stage I would recommend living in, but if you have the option to stay in here for a little bit while you try to make your way out, I think you could, as long as you play a little safe, you know. It doesn't seem as bad as the up in the air stages, even though it might seem like it is. But if you end up falling down one of these holes, at least you'll get to a new zone. Yeah, in the later versions of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, being the mobile as well as the Origins version, you can actually go to a new zone called Metropolis Zone, which was cut from the original game. A lot of people know about this, but hey, it's still neat to see. You're probably not going to live here because of the fact that, well, the one is really underground, meaning that it's probably very humid, but there's a lot of water in the background. That's nice, some fresh water. The only way to get here is from jumping down a giant pit, which you would not be able to survive, as well as the fact that the terrain here is very unstable, with a lot of spikes and traps everywhere. But there's fresh water at least. But yeah, really, because it seems like a really deep down below ground, that might be the biggest sticking point with this zone being very unlivable. But it's not too bad, but also is pretty bad. It's one of those, like, maybe so. Also, there's a giant water thing here, but hey, that may be good or bad. It might be fresh water. But actually, this stage actually does have one good thing. The boss fight here, well, it seems that Eggman's built a giant organ, meaning that you can play music here. That's neat. Alright, the next official zone is Oil Ocean Zone, and, well, you really shouldn't be here. The fact that there seems to be fire in the background, and the fact that there's enemies shooting around, and in Sonic Mania, when this zone came back, you get a fire shield, it lights the whole thing in fire. That's one of the problems. Plus, it's not good to be around this much oil, and probably being near it, probably would accidentally consume it. It's very dangerous. You don't want to be an oil rig, but it is an oil rig, so you probably find some place to stay safe if you go high enough, but the main area that Sonic's in, there's a lot of spikes and a lot of these green platforms that shoot up in the air with fire. It's very dangerous, not very safe, and I bet the air isn't very safe to breathe in. It seems to be a trend in Sonic 2, where there's a lot of places that just aren't easy to breathe in, like all the air and shit. And for every platform that seems to be a nice elevator, there are these cannonballs that shoot you all around, which you would not be able to survive in. As well as oil slides. Yeah, that sounds safe. Oil slides. Alright, Metropolis Zone. The best case scenario that's going to be happening here is that you're just going to find like a door maybe somewhere and just stay there and wait it out, because everything here is designed to kill you. There's too much oil everywhere, which is not safe to consume. It's probably cool to literally everything here, since there's literally oil slides of shit all around, as well as dangerous spikes still around, as well as cannons that shoot you to your death, and a lot of fire going on, and this place seems to be very easily combustible, so yeah, this is not good. Despite its naming, this is not a city. It's in fact a giant factory of Eggmans, and we know about Eggman factories, they are dangerous. We can assume that some baddies could be cleared out of certain areas, though they might remain as some. This one is guaranteed to have them at all costs if it's up and running, because it's an Eggman base. Pretty much those are the most dangerous things. The fact that there are 3 different types of badniks here, and they're all the 3 most annoying badniks to deal with in the entire game. So that's a big problem to deal with. They're always there. But when it comes to traps, there isn't as much here. It's mostly just having trouble navigating. Most of the stage is just narrow passageways, which you just kind of have to go through, and some of them just aren't possible to do as a human, like jumping on there, as well as those spike blocks, which basically would be impossible to do if you were just a regular person and not a speedy blue hedgehog. And I also would like to see how a human would be able to unscrew these screws here, like Sonic does. It wouldn't really be possible. Yeah, one of the main sources of moving in through this area is through screw elevators, which you have to be really fast in order to move, and we're not as fast as Sonic, so they'll be taking forever to run across them. And of course, later on, there's lava, and lava is extremely dangerous, so that's something to look out for. Overall, Metropolis Zone is not a safe place to be. You're mostly just going to be dealing with corridors, and you're just trying to avoid all the badniks that are trying to kill you, as well as the fact there's a couple spike traps, spike blocks, pretty much impossible platforming to do if you're a regular person. No safe space, no resources, nowhere to live, just nothing. A whole lot of nothing. Anyway, the next zone is Sky Chase Zone, which I'm not going to count since it's just Sonic on top of the tornado. And I guess you could just sit in an airplane, technically speaking, because that's all this really is. So, yeah, I guess you could. It's just a flight. I mean, you wouldn't probably survive if you were Sonic in this case, because he's just standing on top of the wing, which is not safe at all. But yeah, I think there's an extra seat in the tornado. Maybe not the original version of the tornado, because it looks like there isn't, but Tails can build you an extra seat, and he'll fly around, and, you know, that seems perfectly fine. You know, Tails is more a safe guy. He doesn't hang around Sonic, but if you were there with him, he'd probably make sure you're okay. You know, it's safe, I guess. You know, without even the banks here aren't that dangerous. So they're just like, they kind of suck here. Alright, Wing Fortress Zone. Anyway, once again, we are high up in the sky, so you might not be able to breathe as well, but it seems that there is some clouds in this here, so maybe not be that bad, but at the same time, we're well up here, and there's a lot of, well, bombless pits falling to your death here. We're not in a safe plane anymore. In order to navigate, we have to jump underneath the engines and try not to get burned, which is impossible. If you're just in that area with those platforms, you'll be dead anyway. Not that you can jump across them anyway. So mostly here, we're probably dealing with high winds, very narrow-looking platforms with very little safety features here, and it could be low air in here, a possibility, as well as some badniks here, since this is an Eggman thing, so of course they're going to be there. Not that they're as dangerous. Even if you try to go in, you'll see Eggman has laid out a trap for Sonic that is pretty much impossible for you to deal with, so you have to jump really high, or jump on these spike platforms, which humans can't jump that high as Sonic can. So overall, this is just a terrible place to be. Then we get to the final zone of Sonic 2, which is the Death Egg Zone. There actually isn't much to talk about here because, well, one, it's just Eggman's base, and the only two things you do here is just fight bosses. Now, are we actually going to be fighting these bosses? I do not know. I said in Wing Fortress, so we might have to deal with that one trap there, because Eggman, assuming he lays it out, it just kind of just there. But here, I don't know, are we going to fight Silver Sonic and Death Egg Robot? I don't think Eggman will waste his time with those type of machinery on just a regular guy. It's just because there's Sonic's there, he uses that against him. He would probably shoot you with a laser more or less than anything, or throw you out his thing by himself, because he could do that. He's pretty strong. Look up the Sonic comics, and you see him throwing around some Mobian guys, so believe it or not, he can do that, and I'm digressing. Now, while we are in space, it's likely that since Eggman is here, that he has some air filtration here. It seems like Sonic can breathe in space based on some of his adventures, so yeah, Sonic doesn't worry about air pressure like we do. I mean, you could tell that in Hilltop Zone. He's a beast. So really what it comes down to is there's not much resources. We can probably find Eggman's stash if he's just not there, but if he is there, he'll kill you. So I don't really know how to rank Death Egg Zone. It's kind of one of those things. Is he there or is he not there? Also, this thing explodes at the very end of the game, so it's probably not very safe. And that is it for Sonic the Hedgehog 2's levels. Overall, it's a pretty mixed bag. A lot of levels have one big thing against them, and some other levels seem more livable than others. The really only level that's really that livable is Emerald Hill Zone, as well as a Aquatic Base Zone. It's got Aquatic Ruin Zone. And that's pretty much it. You tell me what you think is the most dangerous level to live in. What level would you want to live in? And that's all I have to say. See you next time. Maybe I'll do Sonic the Hedgehog 3 or Sonic CD. Till then, see ya.